Peace, family. Peace and blessings to everybody that's tuned in. Man, hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't. This is the Black Patriots, Patriarchs channel. I've gone from my Elder Urad channel, so I'm going to be just doing this as the Black Patriarchs, and just to give an overall brief synopsis of what this channel is intended to do. It's intended to strengthen the Black family by first building up, acknowledging, supporting, and substantiating the wealth and the value and the worth of the Black man, as well as the Black woman, in support of building and supporting pillars, which are our Black children, to help build and create and further the legacy of our race, and to restore the broken image of the Black man and the Black family, as it's posted in the media outlets, how they want to view us, and other outlets that we hear spread across YouTube. We want to not simply just talk about what's wrong with the Black man and the Black woman, but we want to bring solutions. We want to empower you with information on why these things are simply just narratives for people, for whatever their issues are, to gain from monetary gain, just to continue the further destruction of the Black family. And so this is what we want to try to counter. This is not a religious show, although those tenets I feel hold dear and true to us in our historical path and walk, especially in this land, and where we tend to go further. But I also want to just simply show that a lot of the narratives that we hear, especially against Black men, are false, they're conflated, and they only talk and point out part truths. And anything, I feel, that only gives you part of the truth is simply a lie. We often hear the term growing up, maybe some of us have, some of us haven't, but when you go into the court of law, they ask you, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Because there's a difference in when people speak their truth. Are we talking about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So in other words, simply telling me that most Black men are unemployed, or most Black men are living at or below the poverty line, or that most Black men, or that all Black men are dangerous in this degree, if you're speaking in whole sense, in generalizations, you're wrong. You're speaking nothing but lies. It's not true. We can find instances among every race where there is violence, domestic violence against women among every race, where there's financial abuse that occurs among every race, where there are poor people living at or below the poverty line among every race. So to say that the Black man is ill-gotten or has no value because of that is a false narrative. What plays into that? And I've been going over that on my channel recently, and I'm going to continue to do that. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Thank you for coming in the building, family. I see we have a lot of people that are actually watching, but please hit the like button, share, subscribe. And so let me just get into some information, because that's all I want to bring to you is just information on how we can do um, better in our families, how we can do better in our communities, and reasons and showing you reasons to know historically why we've had success, why Black patriarchy has been one of success. Also, I want to that brings me to another point, because I want to show you something um, that a lot of folks have known about Black patriarchy and its importance to the Black family, um, and why they fight so hard against it. I want to show you guys something later on, so let me get it real quick. Get it real quick. Please share. Let someone know that we're live and on the air, man. We're going to talk about some things tonight. We're going to talk about some things just briefly. I'm not going to be before you long. Because I really wanted you guys to see and understand something. So let's get into it, family. I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen right now. We're going to just talk about I'm going to show something, because oftentimes we hear the narrative about Black men don't protect Black women, and why Black men allowed for themselves to be taken into slavery, that we never fought back against the system, or we never fought back against white oppressors in this country. We never fought for our freedom. I want to just show that that's wholly not true. It's a lie. It's propaganda. It's made up. That Black men are docile. That Black men had no fight, no fervor. We just simply bowed down to the white oppressive regime in this country. Um, and that even still today, we still make no effort to fight against the system. And so I wanted to just show, first of all, this is from Dr. Henry Louis Gates, and this was originally posted on the Root. You may not be able to find this anymore. Let me see if this gives me a better connection. Yeah, that's not there. That's not there. So let's just go back, right? It says, so one of the most pernicious allegations made against the African American people was that our slave ancestors were either exceptionally docile or content and loyal, thus explaining the purported failure to rebel extensively. Some even compare enslaved Americans to their brothers and sisters in Brazil, Cuba, Suriname, and Haiti, the last of whom defeated the most powerful army in the world, Napoleon's army, becoming the first slaves in history to successfully strike a blow for their own freedom. And so, again, oftentimes we hear that black men in this country are lazy, we're docile, we're content in the state that we are in. We want to appear to be last. We want to appear to be uh, non-go-getters. We want to appear to be um, people who have no worth, the men who have no worth in ourselves. And so we often are challenged, or we're often criticized for these with these false narratives. But let's get into the information and show if any of that is true, going from the time of slavery until now. Let's see if any of that is true. We have no connections. We don't fight against the system. We don't protect black women. We don't protect our communities. Listen, I had a conversation with someone, not even a conversation, but an exchange with someone, and they said pretty much that because black men were enlisting to fight in the service or fight in wars on American soil, that ultimately that was black men simply bowing down and kowtowing to white men. And it had nothing to do with black men wanting to protect their families, which includes the black woman and child, and wholly protecting their communities. That it simply had nothing to do with that. That black men never fought to protect the freedoms of their families in this country. And that they just simply wanted to equate themselves with white men, to the degree where it had nothing to do that they enlisted in these wars wholly, and that they wanted to simply just go into these places, put their lives on the line, put themselves in harm's way without any thought of them protecting their families, the black woman and the black child. How ludicrous is that? This is what I mean about a lot of the things that we hear and that we see uh, in some of these social media spaces, right? The unintelligence of people to even make these statements, right? With no historical evidence to support it. Simply mundane and mildewed thinkers. These are the mildewed minds that we have to deal with in social media and in even mainstream media. We have to deal with the mildewed minds, especially of some of our own people. Their minds are mildewed. Mildew. Their thinking stinks. You know, when something mildew, it has a smell to it. It stinks. Their brain functioning is fuzzy. Their ability to rationale is black and darkened, and it's toxic. And it's giving off these spores of ignorance that people who are susceptible to these mildew minds are breathing in these toxic spores of ideas. And it needs to be eradicated, and it needs to be dealt with. But let's get back into the fact whether or not black men have historically, from slavery until now, have fought to support the black family, have fought to maintain the black family, has fought to further the black family, which includes the black women and black children. So, as the historian Herbert Aptheker informs us in American Negro Slave Revolts, no one put this dishonest, nakedly pro-slavery argument more badly than the Harvard historian James Schuller in 1882. So Black historian Herbert Aptheker pretty much tells us in his book, American Negro Slave Revolts, that this narrative that blacks were docile, that they didn't rebel against their white oppressors, that they didn't rebel against white folks tearing them down, whipping them, beating them, pulling their families apart, raping black women, selling off their children, even raping themselves. We know about the buck breaking farms. But the narrative is spread about from a lot of toxic thinkers, a lot of mildew minds, that black men that were enslaved didn't fight back against this white oppressive regime during the time of slavery. And that narrative is still continued today, that even today, in face of racism and white supremacy, that black men are docile and we don't fight back against the system of institutionalized racism that we face every day. We're still in that fight today. We're still waging war today, right? So let's get into it. As the historian Herbert Aptheker informs us, again, in American Negro Slave Revolts, no one put this dishonest, nakedly pro-slavery argument. And let me say this real quick. Anyone that you hear make that argument is making a pro-slavery argument more badly than the Harvard historian James Schuler in 1882. This is what he says, who attributed this spurious conclusion to the innate patience, docility, and childlike simplicity of the Negro, who he felt was an imitator and non-moralist, learning, deceit, and libertinism with facility, being easily intimidated, incapable of deep plots. In short, Negroes were a black servile race, sensuous, stupid, brutish, obedient to the whip, children in imagination. This is often the same narrative, this pro-slavery argument. This is often the white racist narrative that we hear from a lot of people on a lot of these platforms. And what blows my mind is that it's coming from black folks or people who's supposed to be black. And I'm going to start saying this. We shouldn't even refer to them as black people anymore. We shouldn't even refer to them as being a part of a race, of our race of people, because they're not looking to build, and they're not giving constructive criticism. They're looking to tear down, to kill, and destroy. That's not who we are. That's not from us. You're not worthy to be a part of our blackness. And black men, stop giving your blackness to these people. And I'm gonna go and I'm gonna say this: black men, stop giving your blackness to just anybody. If they're not loyal to our race, if they're not loyal to who we are as a people, they're not worthy of our blackness. What is our blackness? Our pride, our ingenuity, our genius, our exceptional ways that we love, black love. That's our blackness. Stop giving that away. And I'm going to tell you this, some black folks ain't worthy of it because they choose not to be. They've decided to disconnect from black love. Black love is not selfish. And that goes from both black men and black women. But for those who want to push this narrative that James Schuler in 1882 espoused, that innate, that black people were of innate patience. In other words, they lacked patience. They were docile. They were childlike. Simplicity of the Negro, who he felt was an imitator and a non-moralist. He saw no value in the black life. This would come from white racists. Recorded going back as far as 1882, James Schuler. Learning deceit and libertinism with facility. Being easily intimidated. Incapable of deep plots. In other words, incapable of ingenuity. Incapable, as the Bible calls witty inventions, of creating witty inventions. In short, Negroes were a black servile race, sensuous, in other words, sex crazed. And they were stupid, brutish, just aloof, animalistic, and obedient to the whip, like training animals. Children in imagination. We hear that same narrative today. We hear that same narrative today, especially from people like Cynthia G. I'm going to say it because this is the narrative that she espouses. These people are not worthy of blackness. These people are not black people because black goes beyond skin complexion and skin tone. And it goes even beyond, and some of you may not get this, but it goes beyond even DNA. Because we know that epigenetics affects your DNA. Behavior that is passed down. Learned behavior affects your DNA. Even when you talk about on the scientific level, even if you argue or you agree with Dr. Sheikh Antijoke, one of our great leaders and thinkers and scientists and historians, when he talk and anthropologists, when he talks about the out of Africa theory, how black men migrated out of Africa and into colder climates. And because of this behavior and the migration patterns, because of this behavior moving into colder climates, you see the creation now of the rearranging of DNA, the evolution of people, of the black man, and how we see no longer needed the wider noses because they were no longer in hotter climates, but now in colder climates. So the noses began to slim down. The lips began to thin because the larger lips are to moisten, are for moisture in the hotter climates. But as they moved into colder climates, you began to see the thinning of the lips for less moisture that you need to breathe in during more colder climates. Right? So we clearly know that these and certain behaviors that are passed down from one generation to the next generation, these things affect who we are and who we become. So again, he says, consider how bizarre this was. It wasn't enough that slaves had been subjugated under a harsh and brutal regime for 2.5 centuries following the collapse of Reconstruction. The school of historians unapologetically supportive of slavery kicked the slaves again for not rising up more frequently to kill their oppressive masters. At least we think that this phenomenon was relegated to the 19th and early 20th centuries. Scholars, as late as 1959, Stanley Elkins drew a picture of the slaves as infantilized Sambos in his book Slavery, a Problem in American Institutional and Intellectual Life. I'm telling you guys, read these anti-black racist books, because you'll hear a lot of the same rhetoric you hear on these different platforms that are bashing black men and tearing down the black male image comes from white racist rhetoric. This is where it comes from. Shout out to you, B1 for Life. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I say that often. You'll find, especially with black women, they're gonna either do one or two things. They're either gonna marry someone or get with someone or look for someone who's exactly like their father, or based on their relationship with their father, they're gonna look for someone on the complete opposite end, someone's completely not like their father. And if they ever get with a black man that's in the middle of that, they'll never respect that. They'll never respect that. They're only looking for a man that's exactly like their father or the complete opposite. And if you find a woman that's been hurt by a black man, I guarantee you she'll tell you, that's how my father treated me. Or my father didn't treat me that way. They're not complicated. And so it's clear that when people are hurt by situations and different things, then it becomes, if it's never healed or there's no closure, especially in women, that thing will fester. And then what happens is, in order for them to deal with that issue and with that pain or hurt, they begin to frame a new world around themselves to protect their mental health. They begin to frame a new understanding in a different reality. Their matrix changes around them. And now, at one time, when they saw value in black men, but because a black man hurt them, or many black men hurt them, and usually you can trace it back to their fathers. Now their matrix has changed. And now, so when they adore or when they love their fathers and their black fathers, but because there was some hurt or some pain that occurred, so now no black men are worthy. Or because that boyfriend did something that reminded you of some pain or caused you some pain you never felt before. And because you didn't heal properly from that, now you want to throw, quote unquote, the baby out with the bathwater. Hashtag abort. That's your answer. That's your solution. And this is not an attack, but this is get people to see exactly how some of these things come about. And it's the same thing for black men. They go on tangents and tangents about how black women aren't this and how black women aren't that. And usually, even if you listen to Thomas Sotomayor, he will say the reason why I'm doing my narrative is the way it is because I had issues with my own mother. And so it works both sides. It works both sides. And this is one of the things I'm saying. We need balance in our conversations and our understanding. But when we see something that's lopsided or a conversation that's lopsided, saying that it's all one thing, then what we need to do is destroy that at every fact and every turn. We need to eradicate that argument. And so people will say, okay, why are you obsessed with these people in their argument? No, it's bad. It's destructive. And that's one thing that we need to realize. in how we need to operate and deal and heal in our community is that we have to remove all destructive behavior. All destructive behavior, all destructive narratives have to go. All destructive lies and imagery has to go. Not just what helps soothe you because some black man hurt you, or you allowed some black woman to take you for a fool. We have to get rid of all the narratives. We have to get rid of all the narratives that are destructive to our people. If you haven't already, family, hit that like button, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate that. I really want to build this particular channel. This is going to be my main channel from now on. I really want to build this particular channel because I only want to talk about issues that are uplifting and constructive, but how we do it. How do we get there? It's not just enough to say this is what we should look like, but we need to start talking about how do we get there. And oftentimes we have difficulties in finding that path. How do we get to a better place? Because we don't understand where we came from. We want to dismiss our roots. We want to dismiss where we came from. And your roots, whether they were good or bad, they're still important to where you wind up in life. And if you ignore and don't address either one, whether your roots were good or bad, whether your family history was great or not, if you don't acknowledge that, then you will never know where you should be in the future, or why you need to be where you need to be. Because what happens is oftentimes is that people say, look, I don't want to be this way, or this is what I want to do in life, not realizing that it's in response or reaction to something, whether it was positive or negative that occurred in your life. If you don't understand that, then that thing that you're seeking for will always be elusive. You'll never be able to grab it until you come to terms and come to grips with that thing that you have to deal with, the healing that you need. You got to be able to move in that space, whether it's good or bad. Embrace it and then build your plan off of that. And when I say embrace it, just acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge the failures in yourself, black men and black women. You have to acknowledge the failures in your family, black men and black women. You have to acknowledge those failures. But acknowledging those failures should be used as stepping stones to go higher. You're not having elevated conversations or elevated outlooks on life if you simply tear down, destroy, which is the adversary's purpose, is to steal, kill, and destroy, right? And when I'm talking adversary, and I'm not talking about some guy with horns and a pitchfork sitting on a brimstone throne. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically talking about your adversary could be you. And a lot of times we're our greatest Satan. We're our greatest Hashatan. We're our greatest adversary. Once you deal with that, you'll begin to see immediately. I promise you, if you're looking for instant elevation in your life, stand in front of the mirror, and everything that you have not achieved in life, and everything that has hindered you, and everything that has fought against you, stand in that mirror and make a determination and say, hey, look, I first have to acknowledge where I failed. The moment you do that, you instantly begin to elevate yourself. You've instantly stepped into a new realm of success the moment you start with yourself. Michael Jackson made it popular, starting with the man in the mirror. But that came from the scripture in Paul. Paul said, as a child, I played as a child. But when I became older, I put away childish things. Now I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. What is he saying? He said, once I stood in the mirror and saw and acknowledged my own faults. Once I looked at the man in the mirror and became face to face with the adversary that was within me, that was holding me back from success. Once I realized that, later on, shortly after that, he was able to say, I ran the race. I kept the course. I was able to finish what I set out to do or what I was called to do. Once you recognize that Hashatan is not a character with these horns and somebody just sliding around. No, it could be, and I'm gonna tell you this, sometimes it could be the person that you laying next to, y'all sharing the same pillow with. I'm gonna say this to black men and black women, but specifically to my brothers, stop sharing all of your ideas, because people, because of their fear, will talk you out of the witty inventions. The Bible talks about witty inventions, right? People will talk, they will tell you, you know what, that you'll tell them, you know what, I had a dream about this idea. And they'll tell you, you know what, that sounds crazy. And they'll turn back over and go to sleep. And instantly you begin to say, yeah, that does sound crazy. Not realizing you've just allowed the adversary, because fear, not that individual person, but the fear in that person is the adversary. You just allowed that person's fear to attach to the witty invention or the thought or the dream that you had, and it probably cost you millions of dollars. It probably cost you the answer to the situation that would have taken you out of the situation that you're in. You have to be very careful for who you share your thoughts and ideas with, even if they're laying next to you. And that person, and don't get me wrong, listen to what I'm saying. I'm gonna say it again. The person is not the enemy, but it's the fear in them. It's the fear in them that's the Hashatan. That's the Satan. That's the adversary. This is what I'm saying. So, and listen, once you start getting into something, you start learning it, and then you immediately, I'm gonna tell you, especially with black folks, right? Especially with black men, right? The moment we come into a truth, even about ourselves, or we come into the truth or the knowledge of something or an illumination, the first thing we want to do is do what? We want to share it. We want to share it. We could have just heard something on the radio yesterday, or on YouTube or on the stream or even on this stream, we've heard it. And it just said, man, that thing instantly changed my life. Let me go share it. Let me tell you what happens, right? What has happened is that a seed has been planted, right? And before you can go and fertilize that seed, let it grow down deep in you, let it sprout roots, and then you start to see fruit cultivated on it before it's fertilized and the rain comes and the storm comes and that thing begins to grow in you. What we do is we hear a seed, and instead of letting that thing grow down in us, we take that seed and we want to go show it to somebody. We want to go and share it with them. And then they take it and they say, you know what? This ain't nothing but a seed, man. And you like, no. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you, it should do for you what it did for me, because we're loving that way. We want to see everybody around us succeed. At least real blackness does. Real blackness wants to see every black man around them succeed, every black woman around them succeed. That's what true blackness does, right? But we're so anxious to do that with our people. We don't give that thing that we just learned, that seed, that information, that dream enough to grow down deep within us, that when somebody comes and speaks against it, it's not easily plucked up. It's not easily snatched away from you. Peace to you, Prince of Yahweh. Peace to you, KOT. And again, peace to you. Shout out to Out the Blue, Invest in Blue. And this brother's like Out the Blue, investing Out the Blue, man. Come on this channel, bro. Share your financial information, bro. You know, I know we debate a lot of different things, but I believe every black man has something positive to share. And this is what I'm doing for 2022, right? I'm tearing down false narratives, and I'm not just tearing them down and leaving you with the rubble, but we want to sweep it away, and we want to build something positive in its place. So that's the whole purpose of the streams that I'm doing now. Enough of the days of just saying, hey, look, that ain't good for you, get rid of it. Okay, so if I get rid of it, what do I have in place? And we got too many people doing that. They just want to tear down, but they don't want to give you anything positive in its place to build upon. We can no longer do that. So I don't know who needed to hear that, but hopefully somebody benefited from that. But I wanted to get that I wanted to get back into black men being responsible for their black families and protecting them, and destroying this narrative that we were just docile slaves and we had no fight in us, and we just simply laid down to these white men and allowed them to rape and abuse our women and children, and allowed them to rape and even abuse us in the buck breaking farms, even in this sadistic mentality of dealing with the white oppressors in this country during the time of slavery. And even today, we still see it in institutionalized racism. The mentality hasn't gone away, family. We're still fighting this war. We're just fighting it on a different front, but we're still fighting this same thing. We're still rebelling. We're still rebelling, right? And we're fighting against this narrative that black men are docile and we've never had any fight, and we just came and just laid down. And we didn't protect our black women. See, these are the arguments that they want you to have and hold to today. But just like then, we're facing the same type of fight. We're just fighting it on a different front. So did African American slaves rebel? Of course they did. As early as 1934, our old friend Joel A. Rogers identified 33 slave revolts. This is the part that I really want you guys to understand. Hit that like button, family. Like, share, and subscribe to the Black Patriarchs. Right? Shout out to you, brothers. Shout out to you, men. Shout out to you, sisters that are listening as well. So did African American slaves rebel? Of course they did. As early as 1934, our old friend Joel A. Rogers identified 33 slave revolts, including Nat Turner's, in his 100 Amazing Facts. And 9 years later, the historian Herbert Aptheker published his pioneering study, American Negro Slave Revolts. To set the record straight, Aptheker defined a slave revolt as an action involving 10 or more slaves, right? He defines a slave revolt as an action involving 10 or more slaves, with freedom as the apparent aim, and contemporary references labeling the event as an uprising or a plot or an insurrection or something to the equivalent of these. In all, Apker says he has found records of approximately 250 revolts and conspiracies in the history of American Negro slavery. Other scholars have found as many as 313 attempted uprisings, plots, insurrections, and things of the like, of black men saying, no, we're not going to lay down and we're not going to take the destruction of our families in this country. We're not going to lay down for our oppressors. 313 separate recorded slave revolts, uprisings, and plots and conspiracies created to take down the white oppressive regime in this country since we were brought over here in ships. And even for you abos out there, some that were captured as slaves that were already here. I believe both arguments have some credibility in my research. All right, let me stop there really quick. Let's consider the 5 greatest slave rebellions in the United States, about which Donald Yakovon and I write in the forthcoming champion book to his new PBS series, The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. That was Henry Louis Gates' book. Should check that out, The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, because he talks about a lot of these slave revolts that we just didn't simply lay down and take. We fought for our freedom, and we continue to do that today, right? Even in this country, from the freedoms that we have, for them not to take them away. Let's deal with the Stono Rebellion. We've heard of this before. A lot of us have, but some of us haven't. Even in 1739, the Stono Rebellion was the largest slave revolt ever staged in the 13 colonies. On Sunday, September 9th, 1739, a day free of labor, about 20 slaves under the leadership of a man named Jimmy provided whites with a painful lesson on the African desire of liberty, for liberty. Many members of the group were seasoned soldiers, either from the Yamasee War or from their experience in their homes in Angola, where they were captured and sold and had been trained in the use of weapons. They gathered at the Stono River and raided a warehouse-like store of Hutchinson's, executing the white owners and placing their victims' heads on the store's front steps for all to see. They moved on to other houses in the area, killing the occupants and burning the structures, marching through the colony towards St. Augustine, Florida, where under Spanish law they would be free. As the march proceeded, not all slaves joined the insurrection. In fact, some hung back. And this is often what we get. Even today, we talk about fighting for our rights, fighting against the oppressor, continuing fighting against institutionalized racism and white supremacy in this country. All are not going to come. In fact, it says some hung back and actually helped hide their masters. Help hide their masters. And this is often the language that we get when people tell us, I gotta say it, when people tell us to, they're telling our women to break away from the black man. Look for a white man that might best serve you, because you really are afraid to go through the struggle that's been placed on you by white men. The struggle that black men go through, oftentimes, more so, is because we're still fighting the fight of racism and white supremacy. Not every instance, not everything. Some things, a lot of things that we deal with are self-inflicted wounds. Black men, we have to stop shooting ourselves. We have to stop killing ourselves. We have to stop abusing ourselves. But a lot of what we deal with on top of that is that we still have to yet deal with racism and white supremacy. And that's the difference. Even in these false narratives that we hear, white folks deal with addiction, white people deal with murder, white people deal with rape and domestic violence. They deal with these things on large scales as well. But the problem is that they're able to recover from these things through the programs that was designed to help them come through, because they don't have to deal with the added issue of institutionalized racism and white supremacy. They don't have to deal with that. So oftentimes from these programs that exist, they benefit more from them, because oftentimes more money is funded into these help programs that service whites than in the black communities that service blacks, where facilities are poor, money is not doesn't come through when it needs to be, so you can't hire enough professional staff to service the people that you need. Psychiatrists are not available, mental health experts are not available, doctors aren't available when needed. When these issues happen, counselors are not needed. Counselors aren't there, because the money and the funding for these people to operate in these spaces aren't given in the black community as it is versus white communities. They're not given the funding, so they don't have to deal with the racism and white supremacy. So when they go through their 10-step programs, they have much more support to deal with the same issues that we have to deal with, but under still dealing with racism and white supremacy. And so we have to understand how to deal with these people, even from our own people who say, look, you guys just use racism and white supremacy as an excuse. No, we're telling you how this thing works. How this thing works. And so I'm just want to read this, and then I'm going to close out. I'm only going to be coming on doing maybe an hour show here, an hour show there. That way I can give more information, right? And I can do more shows. The New York City conspiracy of 1741, 1,700 blacks fought for their freedom against whites and slavery. Gabriel's conspiracy in the 1800s. Right? With 53 slaves. A slave named Gabriel would hatch a plot with freedom as its goal. The German Coast Uprising of 1811. Another slave uprising. Nat Turner's Rebellion, the most popular one, of 1831. Those are the top 5 slave revolts that most people know about. But we know that there recorded over 313 of these slave revolts that occurred. But this is where we are. So when people try to tell us that black folks was just docile and we just came and laid down during slavery and we still do that today, no, we were fighting then for our freedom and we're fighting now. The fight is just different. We're still fighting institutionalized racism in this country. We're still fighting it. The whole argument of the critical race theory, that's a fight that's being had, because white folks now don't want you to teach their children in public schools that their ancestors were maniacal slave owners. They were maniacs and murderers. They want you to tell their children that our ancestors that were brought over here were migrant workers looking for a better opportunity in America. That's what they want to put in the books now. But the moment we start talking about the critical race theory and how that is diametrically opposed to that particular narrative, now white folks are raging. They're enraged now. So now we're fighting that front. The fight hasn't stopped. The fighting hasn't stopped. It just looks different. It just looks different. But the fighting has never stopped. We've never stopped fighting against racism and white supremacy in this country. But these are things we have to deal with. And so I'm going to be coming back on a little bit later on, maybe this evening. I know we have a debate on Soda Vision Debate League, but I'm going to be coming back on a little bit later this evening, and I'm going to be finishing out this lesson on the Black patriarchs and how Black men have supported Black families throughout history in this country. We continue to do it today. How Black men, you are the first in line's defense of the Black woman in this country, of the Black family in this country. Nobody else can take your place for that. I don't care what stats they show. The real stats don't even agree with that foolishness. Black man, you are the first and last defense of the Black family in this country today. And we're going to show that. We're going to prove that. And not just on YouTube, but we're going to go into the streets. We're going to prove that. I'm going to show you how that's being done today. Appreciate you, Shalomar. Appreciate you, family. So we're going to get into some things, man. Peace and blessings to y'all, family. This is the Black Patriarchs, fam. Signing out. Please like, share, and subscribe, man. I'm going to be jumping back on this evening, so please look for the notifications. Please look for the notifications. And peace and blessings to you, family. Peace and blessings. Shalom.